Great. Well, welcome everybody. I'll say a few words and then kick it over to Priscilla. I'm Rebecca Lazar. I'm the lucky person, the Bates staff person that gets to work with Priscilla Clark's class of 1966 and all the alumni in the 50s and 60s. And I am just so glad that you're here joining us today. And looks like we have many ages present, so that is ideal, which for the hour that Priscilla has planned to have some conversation about reptiles. So I just wanted to share a little bit about Priscilla's background for anybody who doesn't know her. Priscilla got her first snake at the age of 7, and then she did have to give away her first collection before she came to Bates College. But she ended up acquiring more later in life. And there was a period where Priscilla was in the Peace Corps in the Amazon area, and that further kind of cultivated her interest in reptiles, and it's become a lifelong passion. So we are lucky to be able to sort of learn and appreciate from her life experience with these reptiles. I'll just say another few words about the Zoom function and how we're going to run things here for the meeting. There is a button at the bottom of your screen that says live transcript. So if you click that on, it will show closed captions of the words that as we're saying them, but you can also turn that off. So click the CC button there. You can mute and unmute yourself using that mute button at the bottom left is where it usually shows up. Or the video. You're welcome to have video on or off, and you can toggle that at the bottom left as well. There is a function for raising your hand. So at the end, perhaps we can do some of that. Throughout the hour, we're going to gather questions through the chat function. So if you have something to ask, we welcome you to put it in there, and Alicia will sort of field that out to Priscilla and make sure that we get all our questions answered. We'd love this to be interactive and share your thoughts and ideas and questions about reptiles with us. Yeah, and I think that's pretty much it. We have Priscilla sort of pinned, so you should see her. You can also toggle to a gallery view if you want to see a full spectrum of who's watching the program. That's up in the upper right corner. But I think that about covers it. Thank you so much for being with us, Priscilla.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's so much fun. I'm scrolling across looking at all the 66ers and Sue, hi, my old roommate from Paige, Carol, everybody is like,
Hi.
This is like reunion week. I love it. And by all means, do please keep typing in questions. I'm going to stop periodically. I really do want it to be interactive, and wonderful to see some of the young folks as well, herpetologists of all ages and all interests, or just people who got tired of watching intelligent, intellectual type things that most college reunions offer. That we knew for 66 after a while we'd all get tired of thinking, so we figured we'll do a few show and tell type shows. Anyway, I'm just here. As Rebecca said, I had a passion for reptiles all my life. I don't know where it came from. There's no explaining these things, so if you have a child, and I see there are a few in the audience, and they say they want a snake and they want a lizard, go with it. It's not going to pass. They're not going to get over it. They were born with it, so you may as well deal with it. And I think the other thing I would share with parents and grandparents is get them a snake or a lizard before they want a cat or a dog. Save yourself a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of everything else. So no vet bills, no boarding, no clipping, no nothing, just a snake in a cage. And if you go away for a month, it'll still be in the cage when you come back a month later. So just count yourself lucky if you've got kids who like reptiles. I'm going to start, basically, I'm just going to show off some of the gang here. And talk about. So I'll talk about one at a time, and then I'll kind of stop and look for questions. This is this snake is a corn snake, is one of the most common that we have. Now, let me get him up to the camera as best I can. Problem with snakes is they move around a lot, but other than that, there we go. You've probably seen these if you go to Petco or places like that that sell snakes. For sure, they're going to be selling corn snakes. But now they come in a whole lot of different varieties. They breed them to look quite different. But this is the classic corn snake. This is your all-American southern, up through the Virginias, maybe up through Maryland variety. And what is hard to see, but I'm going to show you, and I didn't realize till I pulled him out, he's about to shed. And I want you to look at his eye and just notice how pale and gray his eye is looking. And when you see my other snake and what her eye looks like, you'll notice the difference. So the fact that his eye is so gray and he's so dull in appearance, isn't, I mean, he's everything, can see he looks gray underneath. And this is normally a very bright orange snake. So he's getting ready to shed. He's getting ready to crawl out of this skin, and underneath it is his whole new skin. And the fun thing about snakes and shedding is when I say crawl out of the skin, that's exactly what I mean. They start at the top, at the head, and then they just crawl right out of it all the way to the end. And you probably found some of these, maybe out in the woods from time to time, even in the house. And if you know what you're looking for, you'll notice there are some markings on the skin. There's a dark stripe and there's some spots. So this actually belongs to my other snake, the hognose. You'll meet her in a minute. But if you collect snake skins, you can actually tell what snake it was that left the skin. So your garter snakes typically will leave, usually they have stripes. I think you've seen them. So the garter snakes usually have stripes that are noticeable on their skins. Now this guy I got as a rescue. So if you're thinking about getting snakes, one thing I point out to you is petfinder.com. There are rescue organizations for snakes and reptiles that are looking to place them, and they might have, cresteds and various other reptiles. And this guy was really completely shunted in terms of growth. When I inquired about him, he was about as long as a pencil. And they said, oh, he's a year old. And I said, no, he's not. That snake's a month old. They said, no, they've had him a year. Well, it turned out that these people thought that if you look at his neck, that the biggest thing that he could possibly swallow had to be smaller than his neck. Well, snakes actually can stretch their mouth pretty wide open. If you've ever watched a snake eat, you can see them on YouTube. And you see how he's got a thin neck and a thin head, and then he gets fatter and fatter and fatter. The reality is that a snake is going to eat something as big as its belly, as big as its stomach, not as big as its neck. So they were feeding it little, teeny newborn mice instead of big mice. And as a result, his growth got stunted temporarily. Like most reptiles, once they have a regular food source, he caught up in no time. And he is now about 120% of full-grown adult weight. And your reptiles in captivity usually are bigger than anything you'll find in the wild because they do eat regularly. And there's nothing, of course, that can predate on them, so they live a long and healthy life. So he's turned out to be a really nice guy, just quite mellow, and he's fun to have around. But and they do keep shedding even when they stop growing. Although over the course of time, they usually put on more weight. He may not get any longer, but he's a good boy.
Priscilla, we do have a question for you about our friend here. Does this snake recognize you?
Okay, say again. Does a snake recognize me?
Mm-hmm.
My ego says yes. My brain says absolutely not. What they recognize, I would say, over years and years of having them, are patterns of handling. So they do know when you pick them up and handle them, whether or not you're a familiar, confident handler that they know, or you're kind of a, here, would you like to hold it? Okay, kind of handler that I don't know. And these guys don't bite, so they don't care either way. But he's gonna be a lot calmer with me and a more experienced handler. It could be any one of you, a more experienced handler than somebody who's anxious. I mean, they, like any animal, can certainly sense a certain amount of just fear. But so in reality, no. Do they understand? Here's a sequence to that question. Do they understand that I'm the one that feeds them? Bizarre question. However, on Sundays, which is feeding day, if I come into the office, which is where all their cages and tanks are, they are all out. And if food is not forthcoming, they stay out of their houses and they stare at me through the glass of their tanks until food is forthcoming. So forgetting feeding day is not optimal unless you want a lot of reptiles staring at you through glass tanks the entire day. Any other questions?
Fun. And what a great lead in to our next question. What do you feed him?
He gets fed. Now he's a natural mouse eater, rodent eater. And that is what they are all fed, is frozen, what you can get from any pet store now, Petco, et cetera. You can get them through Amazon, delivered overnight. Frozen mice of all different sizes, frozen rats, small, large, medium, extra large. There's so many people keeping snakes now that getting snake food is relatively easy. So it is frozen mice for all the snakes. It's interesting in terms of, again, he was fairly quiet, but you could still see he was fairly active. The hognose, and you have to be relatively active if you're going to catch mice. This is a hognose snake, and she likes to eat toads, although she's been taught to eat mice. And you do not have to be very active if you're going to eat toads. In fact, you can pretty much do absolutely nothing at all day. If all you need is a toad, and then you see a toad, and then you crawl up to a toad, and then you grab a toad and eat a toad. So she is not a very active snake. And the hognose is also a very common popular pet. And I want to show you just by comparison how bright her eyes are. If she'll hold still that long, come on. Okay. Oh, you see you. I know your tongue is out. But I guess you can see relatively well, but you can see how nice and dark, I think, and bright her eyes are. That's a better picture. And she shed fairly recently. That was her skin that I showed you. So this is her, and her nice bright shed look. And you can imagine in the woodlands, and these snakes do occur in New England, that if she had to disguise herself hunting for toads in the woods, that she'd be in pretty good shape for that. It'd be pretty hard to see her if you were crawling through the woods. And you can see how quiet she is. Again, by nature, this species is just a very quiet, mellow species. And why do you think she's named a hognose? You see that nose? That's a good profile. That nice pig-looking, snout-looking, upturned, good for digging up toad nose. That's the hognose. That's how they got their name. Perfectly suited for what they eat and where they go to capture prey. So I think it's one of the wonderful things about reptiles that you see more than anything else, more than birds, more than, you know, cats, dogs, anything else, is the incredible variety of adaptation to environment based on the food that they eat and where they need to go to hunt. It's absolutely amazing, from sea snakes to tree snakes to field snakes to forest snakes that live in mud. And some are highly specialized as to what they eat. And they're really just amazing creatures. I mean, you know, modern dinosaurs, basically, as are all reptiles, alligators, crocodiles. They're all in that same ilk.
So we do have a...
Do my young herpetologists know what they're doing with their tongues out there? Why do they keep flicking the tongue in and out? Or even some of the old herpetologists.
Is that their sense of smell?
That basically is smell. Smell and vibration. Snakes technically don't hear. They don't really have a hearing organism, but they very finely tune towards smell and vibration. So by flicking the tongue out, and they can also, of course, being a long creature laying on the ground, they can feel vibration. So between being able to sense prey moving and being able also to sense chemicals essentially in the air that the prey is emitting, and having very finely tuned eyesight in some cases, corn snake being one of them. If you're going to catch mice on the run, you want to have very finely tuned eyesight. And he is, you know, on Sundays on feeding day, when I come in the room, when I come around the corner, I mean, he catches that movement and he's out of his house and ready to, you know, ready for lunch. Whereas she's much slower on the uptake. So
we do have a question about her. Her face is very distinctive. Do the patterns vary, or do they all have the same sort of pattern on them?
patterns. Her face is very distinctive. So you're saying different patterns for this species?
For the hognose,
For
yes.
the hognose? I think she is a Western hognose. And I think the Eastern has the same pattern. Yeah, it's a good question. I don't actually know. We have two species of hognose in this country. They're actually found almost all over the world, which when you think about it, again, is a snake with this specific adaptation, that uplifted nose for digging toads and frogs and other things out of the ground. That snakes with that specific adaptation are found in I think at least three continents. I suspect, based on what I've seen, the Eastern and Western look very similar here, but I'm not sure I absolutely know the answer to that question. But they all look virtually identical. Once you've seen a Western hognose, the markings are absolutely identical to all of them. And,
Awesome.
and that does tend to be true of all species of reptiles in general, whether you're looking at a copperhead or a coral snake or anything else, that they're extremely species specific in terms of marking, because they have evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to develop those markings in order to be successful in their habitat. So it's if you have one that comes out at, an albino or one that is somehow off type, typically those do not survive. Any other snake questions?
We've got a couple more. Carol asks, if she came across one of these snakes or either of those snakes in the wild, what would they do? They
would run. They would do what all snakes do instinctively, which is try to escape from you. They have they're not poisonous, obviously. We have only 4 species of poisonous snakes in this country, but snakes in general are prey food for other animals. Yes, they prey on animals, but they are typically prey food. Birds and whatever love to eat snakes, foxes and gophers, and raccoons love snakes. So it's, but they would run. Natural instinct of any snake is to run, which is why we always caution, if you're taking a walk through the woods and you're in area that you don't know, use a walking stick by all means, just, to go ahead of you. It's a way of essentially tapping the ground ahead of you or tapping the ground over the log you're about to step on. Don't just step over a log when you're walking in the woods. Step on it or step up to it. Make sure there's nothing immediately on the other side. But a walking stick is very handy when you're walking off path in the woods. But they would not, there are very few snakes that will attack you, and they will only do it if cornered. The snakes in this country pretty much have to attack from, we call a defensive posture. And their snakes are not offensive against humans because we're not prey. So they're really, they attack defensively only. Now you may not think you're being offensive, but you may be invading territory, or may have stepped on their tail. So they would run and hide and hope you don't follow.
That sounds good. We have 2 more questions about the snakes. What is the lifespan of these snakes, and what are their houses like?
The house is any, basically their houses. The hognose has a disposable kitty litter pan with a nice hole cut in it, and she's very partial to that. And the corn snake keeps outgrowing his. I finally found him a nice basket that he likes, because he keeps outgrowing other baskets. And he likes something with 2 or 3 escape holes, whereas the hognose does not. She tends more to go to ground, so she wants just something that she can bury herself in like a cave. And I say this because you learn actually by experimentation what they like and don't like. So a house can be anything. It needs to be big enough, but not too big. If it's too big, they don't like it because something else could get in. If it's not big enough, they don't like it because it's not comfortable. If it's in the wrong place in the cage, they don't like it. That's you go through a lot of cardboard boxes before you find the right house for snake. I mean, it's so, but don't, it's like cat toys. Don't go crazy. You know, a piece of string with a cat works just as well as the $15 toy. So eventually you'll find the right box, and it'll work just great. But they are very specific about what they like. So that was house, and the other one was how long do they live? Always an interesting question, because in captivity, of course, it'll be longer than in the wild. Presumably, now the hognose, presumably 20 to 25 years in captivity, remains to be seen. There are very few diseases that snakes get. There are very few parasites, bacteria that they're susceptible to. But you know, they can succumb to illness like any other animal. And corn snake, I'm not positive. I think they have a shorter lifespan. Typically, the faster, quicker species of animals do, but they're designed that way. They work harder during their life. They burn up more energy during their life. He sheds a lot more frequently than she does. And I'm not sure what that means. I find it interesting. I don't know what it means. So I'm going to give that a best guess. And that's, yeah, that's my answer, and I'm sticking to it. I don't honestly know. That's my best guess. That's.
We're all glad to be learning a little bit more, I think, here. So, and then there was a request for a turtle. You have those coming up later, right?
Yeah. Does somebody have a turtle?
They want to see one.
You want to see one? Well, I just happen to have one. I just happen to have. This was a baby that I got. Does it? So who knows of the species that are rampant in Massachusetts? I mean, this one's actually native to New England. So, but there's kind of a giveaway. That's a little bit of a giveaway. And if you look around the plastron, the red marks are a dead giveaway. It's almost as if somebody took a paintbrush and with a paintbrush made little marks. So she's an Eastern painted turtle. And there is a Western painted that looks a little bit different. Turtles are fun. I got her as a hatchling, about the size of a nickel. And this is 6 months later, not even 5 months later. So as is the case with many reptiles, they can grow very quickly. And they do grow very quickly because when you're a baby reptile, you're food for everything. And people wonder why turtles lay so many eggs and sometimes lay them often. And the answer is because so few survive. But everyone loves turtle eggs. Even squirrels love baby turtles. I know when a nest is hatched, if I have not seen the turtle laying in my yard and had a chance to mark it and protect it, I can hear the squirrels screech. I set my calendar. I have the dates marked when the nest might be coming out, and sure enough, I mean, the hatchlings are trying to make it back down to the bog, and the squirrels will go for them. So, and the raccoons will dig up the nests. The day after the turtles lay, the raccoons will dig up the nests more often than not. So these were captive bred, and I've decided I actually we had sort of an event in the bog and lost some turtles here, and I intending eventually I need to acclimate them very gradually, but next year to actually release them into the wild. So there are 2 of them, but they very gradually have to be trained to eat wild food and then also get used to the flora and the fauna from the bog water. So gradually get them used to containers that have just that water. And if they do well, then I will release them. But it'll be hard to part with them, but the turtles are fun. That's another, again, like all reptiles, they're just so easy to keep. They're dirty. They require a lot more cleaning than snakes. That's the thing. I mean, the water has to get changed fairly frequently, and I get a lot of snapping turtles. That's probably something those of you that see baby turtles or turtles laying are going to see a lot of snappers along with your painteds. But she's very typical of her species, and she'll get to be pretty good size, probably about, well, the female about 8 inches would be typical for the female. They get bigger than the males. But again, in captivity, they will get a little bit bigger. She'll have a good head start. So with turtles, you just have to be prepared to clean the water. With snakes, you feed them once a week, they poop once a week. You clean the cage once a week. Don't go crazy. Yeah. Fill the water bowl when you get around to it. Don't go crazy. Yeah. The absolute perfect pet for any child that's apt to forget to feed an animal. It doesn't matter, other than the fact that the snakes will look at you through the glass. Yeah. But, okay, we're ready to move on to lizards. With any more snake question, we can come back to snake questions too. We're not on a specific time frame here.
We do have a couple of turtle questions.
Oh, great. Turtle questions.
Yes. So one is, do you have a bog on your property?
I do. I'm next to one. I'm next to conservation land. So I do. That's right out my window, right out that window that is right there. And they come up, they do come up from the bog. So it's conservation land, and it gives me a great variety of neat stuff.
That's lucky. That's great. And then the second question is from Carol. Is this the same type of turtle we could buy at the 5 and dime when we were kids?
No. Those were, although they do look fairly similar, those are sliders, are red-eared sliders. And they still sell them, I'm sure, if there were any 5 and dimes, but they certainly sell them at Petco and stores like that still. And they're perfectly legitimate to buy them as pets. What is not legitimate, although is happening, is to release them into the wild. But that is happening, and they are establishing a foothold in a lot of the natural areas up here. And they're interbreeding somewhat successfully, apparently, with some of the species of painted turtles. That is not completely clear, the last I read from Audubon, but sliders are showing up in the annual, when we do our annual nature inventory, people are catching pictures and actual red-eared sliders. So they compete, if nothing else, they're competing for habitat. And they're not indigenous to this area, they're a southern species. So, but if you're going to get a pet turtle, that's probably, and keep it for a while, that's the turtle to get for sure. As long as you're not planning to release it into the wild, that's the turtle to get. And if as I would say with anyone, if you have a child or anyone else who has a reptile they're not interested in any longer, pet stores often take them back, and or there are reptile rescue organizations that will happily take them. And the Mass Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals has a whole division of unusual animals for adoption. So, from ferrets to God knows what all, but they usually have a pretty good selection of crested dragons and things that kids have gotten tired of, and geckos, leopard geckos are definitely out there. So there are venues for placing animals that people no longer want. You don't have to just let them go. But the fun thing now, Carol, too, is that if people are interested in turtles and snakes, you're no longer restricted to the Petcos. There are a lot of wonderful, where I get all my animals, there are 2 online breeders that I work with. There's also a great breeder in New Hampshire that I like. And my email will be posted, I know, at the end. If anyone wants more information, feel free to contact me, because you can go online to Underground Reptiles or any of these, and you would be amazed now at what you can find. The herpetology, and the interest is incredible. And from lizards to turtles to frogs to toads to snakes to everything. And you can easily buy 100 different species of snakes and 60 different species of turtles, and African mud turtles and whatever. Just make sure that they're bred in captivity and not captive bred, not captive. As long as they're bred in captivity, you're safe, 1, and 2, you're protecting the natural population. And then to make sure that you have the capacity to care for them, because some of them are very specialized. But they are absolutely fascinating. And like any other, like as happened with cats and dogs, people are interbreeding different species of pythons and boas and corn snakes and whatever to come up with amazing color combinations and patterns that are quite intriguing. So it is fun. It's fun to go shopping. Just feel free to Google buy a snake, and you'll see some of these sites, but they're so lots of choices. But I do think PetSmart. I know Petco and PetSmart for a while they came under a lot of criticism for the way they managed their selling of reptiles, and they have since both I would have to say to their credit, they've both done a very good job of cleaning up their act and selling only quality animals that come from known breeders that are captive bred. And above all, and this was one of the criticisms, stocking the food that you need to feed them. So if you're gonna, buy a specialty turtle that eats, Indonesian cockroaches, you damn well better sell Indonesian cockroaches, because those aren't all that easy to get on Amazon.com. Although you can actually. So I don't disparage them as sources, and they do stand by their animals. So if something happens, they'll take it back if they're not healthy. So
That's great. I will say we do have about 20 minutes left on this.
Okay.
So I think we're ready for some lizards.
Move on to lizards. Well, lizards are fun. Now, lizards, I know for lizards, most people are pretty much familiar with your classic bearded dragons, and cresteds are a kind of a go-to lizard of the day. This gal is a different species that I actually highly recommend, especially for kids, for anyone who wants a lizard. And she's called a spiny tail for the reason that she has all these spines on her tail, which are actually incredibly sharp. And they are designed to be very unappetizing. When she climbs into rock crevices to hide or to go to sleep at night, she leaves her tail sticking out and basically is, yes, I'm here, come get me if you want me. And nothing does, because trying to eat this tail is extremely unappetizing and almost impossible. So very well defended animal. And I recommend this lizard, especially for kids. The scientific name is Euromastix, but spiny tail will get you there, because she's a vegetarian. And working with, cresteds and some of those species, they eat grasshoppers. And you got to raise grasshoppers and buy grasshoppers, and then you got to feed the grasshoppers protein food so they have good nutritional value. And you spend more time dealing with the food than you do with the animal. Just so having an animal that's a vegetarian that likes lettuce and peas and stuff is just kind of neat. And she's just a fascinating lizard. She is shedding. This is for fun. Pieces of her are falling off, as you may see. And this is how she sheds, in pieces. The lizards don't shed all at once. Their skin just falls off as they run around. And she is indigenous to all of the Mideast, to Israel, to Afghanistan, to species like her. So spiny tails in general, not necessarily her coloration. She's a specific kind, but she is captive bred. She's not wild caught. And some of them she's full grown, some get bigger. So depending on what you want, you can get a larger lizard. But they get quite used to handling. She has a very distinct personality, and she's really quite a social creature. Aren't you? Yeah, yes, I am. And I'm gorgeous. And I'm so gorgeous. So lizards are fun. Lizards bask. There's just something, I guess it's like watching a cat take a cat nap or something. I mean, there's something about watching a reptile just bask out in the, and turtles do the same thing. They just lay out in the little light you provide, the ultraviolet light, and just lay there with their legs out and their head hanging out and just enjoy the sun. There's something just relaxing about looking at them doing that. Now I'm going to get up to pick up Mango's in the cage behind me. Now, any questions about her?
We do have one, jumping back to turtles, actually.
Okay.
Do turtles shed?
Do turtles, I'm sorry, what was the question?
Do turtles shed?
They do not. They do not. And I'm going to qualify that with as far as I know, but I'm 99.9% positive that they do not. The same way frogs don't shed, although frogs are amphibians, so they're in a different class. But squirrel skin and their shells just keep growing with them. So they're kind of one integrated system. So I'm going to give that a no.
That sounds good to me. I am partial to Mango, so I'm excited for Mango to come visit. But
Mango in his cage, because he's good for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then he's done.
Awesome. We're excited.
Yeah, all right. Now, Mango is a blue-tongued skink, and he's an Indonesian, so that's his country of origin, although again, he was bred in captivity. And when he relaxes, he'll start sticking his tongue out, which is as you've noticed, is a very reptile thing to do. They all have sensory mechanisms of some kind in the tongue, sensing, tasting, smelling. It just gives them an added way of feeling the world. I mean, lizards have pretty acute hearing. I mean, lizards have holes in the side of their head that, almost, sometimes you think you can actually, where are your ears? There they are. You sometimes think you can actually see all the way through their head if the light is right. But now, and interesting now, and he's shedding. So you can see some of his skin is just peeling off. And that's, let's see if you can see that. And that's how lizards shed. And you just have to, it's interesting because with the lizards and the shedding, because they don't shed completely, after they shed, you need to kind of do manicure inventory to make sure that all of the skin came off their little toes. Because otherwise it can bind up around their toes and can actually cut off the circulation and cause them to lose a toenail. And sometimes these guys need manicures actually, because if they're designed to be crawling on rocks, some of them, and if they're not getting, it's like a dog's claws, if they're not getting worn down naturally, then sometimes you do have to clip them. But you're going to start sticking your tongue out, but he will eventually, and when he does, you'll know why he's a blue-tongued skink. And until that time, you'll have to take my word for it.
How old is Mango?
He's quite interesting. I mean, he's actually getting quite mellow in his old age. Not that he's that old. So he's about 4 now, and he'll probably live to about 20. Where's the rest of you? There you are. So he's got a pretty good size rest of him, tail. And it's interesting to watch him move quickly. We think about the evolution of animals and how skinks evolved into snakes. When he moves quickly, he just tucks his little hind feet up behind him, and he doesn't even use them. He pulls himself along with his front feet, and he can move very fast, and just tucks his hind feet up, and he just motors on. So it's, and there are species of snakes that still have stubs where the hind feet used to be. So they still actually have the bony structure from that. But are you going to be skinky or not?
We do have a question about, so we see you rubbing under Mango's chin a little bit. Does that help him relax?
Does
rubbing under his chin help him relax?
I'm not sure. I have no idea.
He looks very chill.
Helps me relax. You know, it's sort of like, you know, it's one of those things you do and you say, oh, does your cat like that? So I don't know, but I like doing it to the cat. So I was like, my senses, yes, but he's being funny today. Because, yeah, I mean, normally he'd be doing something. That's typically you're not doing anything. Right?
Not everyone's ready to perform today. That's okay. We do have some other questions, Chris. Do any of your other reptiles hang out together? Are they buddies?
No, not buddies, and surprisingly territorial. And most reptiles view other reptiles as food. So snakes eat snakes. They're more than, snakes eat lizards. They're certainly more than happy to all consume each other. Plenty of lizards eat snakes. Yeah, so that's something to be very careful of, is combining any animals like that. So no, they would have to be the same species. And then if you have, especially with lizards, a little less so with snakes, but still to some degree it's the same. You will still get male on male aggression, and they'll be very territorial. So it's yeah, so no.
Okay. And what is the relationship between these lizards and alligators?
Well, you know, same root stock, essentially. I mean, I think alligators are actually a much older. You have to go up through the reptile, you know, phylum. But are you sticking your tongue out now? That these guys are all land lizards. Although he, being an Indonesian, tends to like swamps. And of course, the alligators and crocodiles are your aquatic lizards. There are other aquatic lizards. They're not the only ones. So it's, but they're all ultimately of the same family, just different branches thereof.
Still no tongue action. Sue says he's camera shy, which I believe. And Judy asks, do you have any of the same species together?
I don't. These are all, at the moment, they're all independent. So they're all one of a kind. Well, I do have two turtles. So those two guys came together. They're housed together. Yeah, and the corn snake, well, I didn't intend, again, that that he was kind of an accidental. Don't go on Pet Finder. Don't ever go on Pet Finder and check out cats or snakes, or you never know what you're going to end up with. So it's a dangerous site for shopping. But so no, these are all basically one of a kind. I could put a male lizard in with her, with the spiny tail. But she's happy on her own. So, and I don't have any desire to try to get into breeding. So no, and I think we were talking earlier before we sort of went live with the whole gang, was somebody had a lizard. I think it was your mother, was your sister when she was young. I'm trying to think. Anyway, who had the wrong name and then discovered when the lizard grew up that it was actually a boy and not a girl, and had to change the name. And that's one of the problems, unfortunately, that happens with reptiles somewhat frequently. But because of that, the name change being the least of your problems, having a whole lot of reptiles you weren't planning on might be one outcome. And but another one is you get two males and they will fight to the death, and you won't necessarily know that until you see it. So that's so it is hard. Snakes are relatively easy at a certain point to sex. Lizards, not at all easy. Very hard to do. Turtles at a certain age, but not when they're babies. Best, you give it your best shot, but not really. So it's, yeah, they have to grow up. So best to keep them separate unless you know for sure what you have.
That makes a lot of sense. I think Mango's still being resistant to showing off that blue tongue. He's thinking about it. Does anyone else have questions in the chat? I'd also invite folks to unmute themselves. We just have a few minutes left.
No, and I'd love to hear from other people if they have reptile stories, whatever. It's, you're not going to show your tongue, are you? No, you're not. No. Oh, there you are. I take it back. Maybe you are. Are you? If I do that, are you?
So I'll just jump in with an audio question. They are happy to be solo. They're sort of independent creatures. They don't sort of feel lonely or anything like that.
No, absolutely not. No, they're strictly habitat. Because of the way they hunt and survive, they really just own habitat. So the fewer of them in a given area, the better.
Yeah.
And they're really solo creatures.
Well, I think we are reaching the end of our time together, Priscilla. I'm so grateful that you came, and Alicia shared your email in the chat. So if anybody wants to reach out about reptiles or questions you may have that you didn't share today, please do. But thank you so much for coming, Priscilla. We really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you all for being here. My classmates, my 66ers and everybody else. It's wonderful to see you all and have you here. Thanks for coming.
Great presentation.
And anyone who doesn't have a snake, no time like the present. Right?
Yes, that's very true.
Right. Well, we'll see you all on some other reunion programs. Keeps going through Saturday. So
okay.
Wonderful.
Right. Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, Chris. Bye, Mango.